Hi there, my name is Deborah Melkin, and I wanted to talk about some of the language enhancements we have with SQL 2022. There's usually so many different features that come with each new version that it's really hard to keep track of. And I always find that I forget to look at what the languages are. What changes are there to T-SQL that I should know about? It's 2024 right now as I'm recording this. 2022's been out for a while. You'd think I'd have time to figure this out. But like you, I've just been really busy with everything else, all the other cool features that are out there. So I thought I would take a couple minutes and look at some of the enhancements that we have. The first one that I'd like to start with is with having to do with windowed functions. I like windowed functions. The first time I was able to use one in production, it was genius, and I was so excited to be able to use it. But there have been enhancements that have been made with SQL 2022, a couple really cool shortcuts that I want to show you. So let's move over to my SQL Server. I'm working with my AdventureWorks database. I've made some changes, so it's Deb's AdventureWorks, but it's the AdventureWorks you know and love. So before SQL Server 2022, when I would do window functions, I could do cool things like this, that the partitions for the windows without using a group bys, and I can group my data in various different ways. But now, it's kind of messy, a little harder to read, but we have some improvements that we can do with that with SQL Server 2022. We're able to do things like this, where I can declare what those window statements are at the end of my where clause or between my uh, before my order by at the end of my statement. And then I can use those shortcuts, those aliases in my statement. And it makes it a little easier to read because I can look here, I can see what those partitions are. I can take my statement, run it, get my results. But I can do even more with that. For example, it's reusable. Before, if I wanted to just get one of those, use it multiple times, I have to write it out multiple times. Lots of room for mistake and errors, kind of hard to read once you get much more involved query than just this. But then when we come to SQL Server 2022, if we notice my over clause, let's do it a little better here. My over clause, I just state the name of the alias that I've created here. So now I'm able to reuse it very quickly and make sure that we're aware that the same one is being used for all of that logic. Now there's another cool thing we can do adding on that. Here we have one where I have the order by, it's repeated for my clause, order by, order date. I use that multiple times. I'm changing a little bit with the partitioning, one by sales order, one by product ID, but I can also use this new window function, this new syntax with it, and I can do cool things like this, where I can declare the first one order by, which is the order by order date. Then I can reference that window function in my next window function here. And again, I'm doing it here. So I can take that order by, but I can also do more. I can take it and I can create that partition. So with that, we can do my statement over here. I'm just doing alias. But second, notice I'm taking that function that I've declared at the bottom, and I can do things like rows unbounded proceedings, so I can get my running total as part of it. Here, I don't need anything that's grouped. I just want my order by, and I can run all of this, and I can still get my query. Pretty cool way for us to be able to enhance the way we use those windowed functions, especially if we have to repeat the same one over and over and over. It's a really cool trick to kind of make our lives a little bit easier as we have to write these statements. All right, here's one that I was totally not expecting, but I think it's kind of cool. Is distinct from or is not distinct from? Looking at our query, when we do comparisons, there's always been a problem when we've had to deal with nulls as potential values. We had to treat them a little differently. For example, I'm looking at my product table and I want to see where the color is equal to black. I have options. It's either equal to black, it's not equal to black, or if I'm dealing with nulls in that field, because this is a nullable column, I have to do things like color is not null or color is null if I want to get the different variances. So I can see all the different types of values that I'm looking for. But I always have to make sure that I'm aware of a null is in that field, depending on if I'm trying to get the opposite of what I'm looking for. Now, this is distinct from, is not distinct from, is really cool in the way that it handles that. So we now have this new syntax. Select where the product color is distinct from black. When I run this, and if I zoom in a little, we can start looking at our color field. And when our column, we'll notice something. Nulls and silver and actual colors, which are not black, are appearing in our result set together at once. That's exactly what this does, is it takes into account nulls. A null is distinct from black. So that's how it's able to, it's still not saying not equal to black, but it's distinct from. So that's a way we can kind of count how we're dealing with nulls. And I think that's a really cool way of writing something that we'd had before. Now, if we changed it to something the opposite, where color is not distinct from black, we look and we can see our results. Everything is showing up as black because it's not distinct from black, kind of equal to. But again, it's a way of writing that syntax so we can handle nulls much better in our statements. Now, the case that I always see these in and where this I can see useful in terms of writing the language, doing a little playing, I don't know if it necessarily changes everything overall in terms of the way the query plan works, but we see this sort of logic all the time, or we can see where it would be useful a lot of times when it has to do with things like outer joins, our good friends, outer joins. Where before we would write these queries, you know these queries, you've probably had to troubleshoot them when you have a long list of them. I don't think this is going to solve the problem, but it's going to make it clearer what our queries are going to do. Because what we're doing is we're often we're doing a left join, and we want to look where the color is not equal to black or the color is null. And I see this all the time. So how can we write that with our new logic? Something very simple, where color is distinct from black. And now we have it where everything, the colors here that we were returning, we have all our different colors, and if we scroll down a bit, we've got some where we don't have a color specified, so the value is null, but it's still being returned because it's distinct from black, which is, again, kind of a cool way to write this and make it a little clear what we're looking for. And we can use this syntax, we can use a variable, and so we can get those same exact results, and it's taking that into account. Pretty cool syntax. Now, what does it mean for nulls, right? Because we're saying it's not distinct from. Well, we can do that. So let's start it first. We'll start where color is not distinct from null. And look, null's null. It's not quite the comparison, but it's using that not distinct to make that difference. So we can pull up everything where essentially it's a different way of writing where our color is null. And then we can do it the opposite way, where color is distinct from null. And essentially we've said, hey, is the color not null? It's a different way of writing it, but depending on how we're using it, it may be another nice way for us to enhance our T-SQL statements to make it clearer as to what we're going to do. Not changing the syntax, and I'm going to have a feeling that if you think this will solve some of those weird catch-all queries, I don't think it's going to quite do that, but it may make it easier to read so we understand what those queries are doing so we can figure out how to write them better going forward. All right, here's the next one that I found. Greatest, least. These seem pretty simple, but I like them. All right, jumping straight to it. SQL Server 2022. Before we had that, y'all, I wrote you an unpivot statement. Didn't take me long to do, but it's one of those cases where I want to find the earliest and last date on each sales order for the customer. So we have one record, we have 4 different dates. This is one way we could do it. Okay, and pivots it's cleaner than, trying to write this sort of case when statement because this is totally readable, right? Greatest, least, I mean, look at this syntax, y'all. This is pretty. So I just say least. I list my columns. It's not an aggregate, but I'm on my same record. I'm able to put all those different values. It's going to go through all the values that I need. It'll figure out the earliest date for me. And there we go. I'm off and running. How simple is that? So there are also enhancements to trim, R trim, and L trim. I know what you're thinking. They're pretty straightforward functions, right? What do, kind of enhancements would we need with those? Well, I think these ones are pretty cool. Before SQL Server 2022, I've been doing a lot of different data manipulation. I've been needing to take a word off the end. I've been needing to strip a prefix off. So I would use replace or substring. And these are pretty tame compared to some of the other things that I've done. I've got to confess. But when we look at the results, it's a pretty simple thing. I've removed handlebars off the name of the name, and I've removed that prefix for the product because that we know that's junk information. For the internal reports, this is what we're looking for. All right, straightforward. How are these enhancements going to help me? Well, let's go down here. After 2022, one of the enhancements they've made for trim is the ability to say, I want you to take this string off the beginning. I want you to take this string off the end. You have an option to take it off both ends as well. So there's syntax for that as well. So when I run this, you can barely tell the difference. But again, I've removed the trailing word handlebars from the results and I've removed the prefix, all within my trim statement. It's there, it's the same syntax. I don't have to think about anything that I'm doing. Now, maybe I don't want to deal with trim and say trailing or leading, because trim without either of those works just the way it always has. Well, what if I don't want to use leading or trailing? Well, I can still use R trim and L trim, but I have the options to add the same logic to say remove handlebars off the end. It's R trim, so it already knows it's taking it off the right side or the end of my phrase. And same for product number, L trim, leading trail, so it already knows which end to take that off of. And again, the results are exactly the same. It's a simple little change, but with the amount of data manipulation I've seen going through and just being able to use trim or R trim or L trim to get rid of some of the trailing that we have to do based on some of the data that I've seen come through. And I've done some pretty crazy things with substring and reverse and all of that sort of thing. Now my code is so much cleaner and so much simpler, all thanks to L trim, R trim, and trim enhancements. There are more enhancements made to T-SQL and SQL Server 2022 than just the ones that I've shown. But what I love about them is they're just small changes that are so effective and will make our lives so much easier. If you're interested in finding out more, definitely check out Microsoft's website, learn more about it, and start playing with them yourselves. Start seeing which of those language syntax are really going to help make your code that much cleaner and that much easier to write and read and see where it goes from there. All right. Talk to y'all next time. Bye.